Today you will learn about fall protection safety procedures. We will strive to provide information that will increase your knowledge and help to make you a better and safer worker. There are many instances in a variety of industries where workers are required to operate at heights both great and small. The higher someone rises, of course, the greater that person's risk for injury. This is why the proper use of fall protection and today's related training are vital to work safety. Just a few years ago, a boom lift operator decided for just a moment to unclip his lanyard from his designated anchor point in order to more easily handle the materials he was working with at roof height. In that moment, however, he lost his footing, tumbled over the rails, and fell to his death. With that in mind, the following is a list of OSHA's top 10 most frequent cited standards. OSHA publishes this list as a means of alerting the industry about these commonly cited standards. The hope then is that you take whatever steps necessary to both find and fix recognized hazards before they become a problem. Number 1 is fall protection. Number 2 is hazard communication. Number 3, scaffolding. Number 4, respiratory protection. Number 5, lockout, tagout. Number 6, powered industrial trucks. Number 7 is ladders. 8 is machine guarding. 9 is electrical with wiring methods. And 10 is also electrical with general requirements. Interestingly enough, the same hazards show up on these lists time after time. Fall protection violations are consistently at the top of the list, and year after year after year, injuries are sustained and lives are lost. Even worse, as far as fall protection is concerned, the number of violations are increasing. First and foremost, safety starts with a knowledge and basic understanding of the standard governing your specific industry and work situation. These are some of the main federal fall protection standards. However, because various states, cities, and even companies can have stricter standards, it is your responsibility to be familiar with and heed all regulations specific to your workplace. Specific requirements for fall protection will vary by industry or job type. For instance, general industry requires fall protection when working at heights of above 4 feet, construction at 6 feet and above. When using scaffolds, fall protection is required at 10 feet. On top of that, anytime you are working over dangerous equipment, machines with open drive belts, pulleys or gears, or open vats of acid, etc., fall protection is required without regards to height. Fall protection program. In addition to knowing the standards, safety continues with the existence of and an awareness of your fall protection program or plan. Generally speaking, most fall protection programs simply align with the applicant's standard requirement for the use of fall protection and fall arrest gear in specific situations. These programs should be a natural extension to any manuals, guidelines provided by the manufacturer of the fall protection gear. In line with what you are doing today, consistent and applicable training and retraining by a competent person should also be a vital part of this program, and not only training, but a conscious application of that training. When it comes to refresher training, OSHA's standard in some instances, like forklifts, are very specific. Operators must be reevaluated every 3 years to see if they are still competent to operate the equipment. Best practices say to apply the same rule to all types of equipment. A so-called free pass cannot be awarded based on experience, age, or time on the job. The extent of the evaluation is to be determined by the employer, but should include a written and practical examination that prove continued competency. Did you know Standards specify that a worker must be retrained if any of the following apply: changes in the workplace, changes in the types of fall protection systems or equipment to be used, insufficiencies in the effective employee's understanding or use of fall protection or equipment showing that the employee has not remembered the acquired understanding or skill, after the event of an accident or near miss, whenever deemed necessary by the employer or supervisor. Fall protection. By definition, fall protection is the implementation of a contingency plan protecting workers at heights. Contingency, in return, is defined as a future event that is possible but cannot be predicted. Falls are certainly unforeseeable, and yet, as discussed, they occur daily on work sites around the world. This is why it is so vital that fall protection principles are both understood and applied. They can, should, and will be the means of not only reducing the possibility for falls, but in some cases, altogether eradicating them. Prevention versus restraint versus arrest. Under the umbrella of fall protection programs, three main categories exist: fall prevention, fall restraint, and fall arrest. All three constitute fall protection, but behave differently. Fall prevention. As its name implies, fall prevention has everything to do with setting up boundaries in such a manner that they, quite simply, prevent a fall from happening by way of preventing workers from reaching the fall hazards at all. These types of systems can cost more to implement upfront, but they are preferred when possible because there is the least risk associated with their use. Fall restraint. Similarly, fall restraint is a fall protection system put in place to prevent workers from reaching a particular fall hazard. The difference, though, is that instead of erecting barriers, fall prevention is that, in this case, is achieved by utilizing a tie-off system. A harness and lanyard, for instance, can reach no further than in front of the edge from which a worker could fall if not tied off. The cost for supplies is initially and typically lower, training not included. And while it may not be as ideal as fall prevention, it is better than fall arrest. Fall arrest. With that in mind, fall arrest refers to a tie-off system put in place to arrest or stop a worker in the act of falling from falling any farther than a certain predetermined point. All things being equal, this is the least ideal because it means a worker has to, in part, fall. But when it is the only option, arresting a fall with a harness is better than the ground arresting it. Because every job site is different, in many cases, the combination of these three categories is used throughout any given workday. Passive versus active. Fall protection systems can be broken down even further into two additional subcategories: passive systems and active systems. Passive means without active response. More specifically, a passive fall protection system is one that is put in place and requires no further involvement from a worker once in place. This type of system is installed before work begins and then remains installed until the work is done and the potential for falls has been removed. Only then it can be taken down. An example of a passive fall protection system would be guardrails, safety nets, skylight screens, or a hole cover. These devices do not move around the worker, nor are they specific to any one worker's protection. They are set up for the protection of anyone in the vicinity who might, at any given time, be at risk of falling. Active fall protection systems, on the other hand, require an ongoing interaction with the worker using them, meaning they are installed, worn, and maintained by the worker from location to location. The most common example of this would be a harness and its corresponding lanyard, which naturally require the worker at risk to inspect, wear, and adjust them for them to be effective. Competent versus qualified. Competent person is someone who is capable of identifying existing and predictable hazards in the workplace and who has authorization to take prompt corrective measures to eliminate them. In this sense, competency is demonstrated, not certified. It is designed as a designation made by an employer. On the other hand, a qualified person is someone who, by possession of a recognized degree, certificate, or professional standing, or who, by extensive knowledge, training, and experience, has successfully demonstrated his or her ability to initiate programs or procedures, as well as solve or resolve problems relating to the subject matter or the work being done. For example, regarding fall protection, a competent person can readily identify hazards within the operation and solve them or stop the work until the issues are resolved. A qualified person, though, has the knowledge and track record to design a fall protection system and oversee its implementation. Equipment. Personal fall protection. The personal fall protection system, also known as the personal fall arrest system, or PFAS, is certainly the most recognizable, if not the most common form of fall protection. A PFAS includes three main components, often described as the ABCs of fall protection: anchorage points, body wear, connective devices. A. Anchorage point. Anchors or anchorage points are fixed to a strong structural member. Anchors are where you tie off to complete your PFAS. B. Body wear. The equipment that will be directly attached to your person while operating, primarily full body harness. C. Connective devices. The connectivity between your body wear and anchor, for example, snap hooks, lanyards, and self-retracting lifelines, or SRL. The type of connective devices you use will depend on the type of work to be done, or even just what is available to you. Body wear. Body wear is the equipment that will be directly attached to your body. Body wear, of course, can change from task to task, depending on what the job requires. You must be aware of the different types of body wear and when to use them, under what set of circumstances. Most common are full body harness and body belts. Full body harness. A full body harness is designed to distribute the impact, the fall force, evenly throughout your body. A full body harness is ideal for most work practices due to the mobility you have while wearing it. The D-ring found on the full body harness must be made of drop forged, pressed, or formed steel and must be able to withstand a minimum tensile load of 5,000 pounds. Tensile strength is the resistance of a material to breaking under tension, or the maximum load a component can withstand before failure. D-rings must be proof tested by the manufacturer or withstand a minimum tensile load of 3,600 pounds without cracking, breaking, or permanent deformation. The dorsal D-ring is the only place where a fall arrest lanyard or similar fall arrest equipment may be attached. This D-ring can also be used for positioning, rescuing, or for lowering a worker into a confined space. PFAS are made up of various other components that can differ by brand or type, including, but not limited to, buckles, clips, clasps, connectors, grommets, and attachments. Refer to your owner's manual, fall protection program, or the competent person on staff if you need help identifying the parts of your fall arrest equipment. You should know what they are called and what they do and how to properly inspect and use them. Adjust the leg straps to make sure that they are high enough on your leg and that they are not too loose and not too tight. A good rule of thumb is to slide your 4 fingers between your leg and your leg strap. If all 4 slide in without much resistance, you are good to go. If all of your fingers do not slide in with moderate effort, then it is too tight. If you can fit your fist between your leg strap and your leg, it is too loose. Body belts. There is a lot of confusion regarding body belts, with many people believing that they have been banned altogether. The answer is no, they have not been banned entirely, but the use of them for fall arrest is prohibited. That means they can be used for positioning and restraint purposes only, thus preventing worker from reaching an unprotected leading edge and consequently entering the fall zone. Again, they are not meant to be used as a fall arrest device. The reason for this change is because, unlike the full body harness, a body belt poorly distributes stopping forces throughout the body and can actually cause greater injury in the event of a fall. Additionally, using a body belt as a personal fall arrest system could expose you to other hazards, such as serious internal injuries, technical asphyxiation throughout prolonged suspension, and even falling out of the belt altogether. Connected devices. Connected devices are simply that, the component that connects the bodywear to have onto a load rated anchorage point. There is a wide variety of connective devices depending on the type of work being done. You should know the specific requirements governing any and all devices being used on a daily basis. We will discuss the following: snap hooks, lanyards, and self-retracting lifelines. Snap hooks. Not all snap hooks are created equal. Each type of snap hook is designed for connecting to specific anchorage points and rated for certain tasks and weight. Be sure you are always using the correct connective device for the situation in which you are working. All connectors are to be made from drop forged, pressed, or formed steel or other materials of equal integrity and strength. Like D-rings, snap hooks are to have a minimum tensile strength of 5,000 pounds and be proof tested to withstand at least 3,600 pounds of fall force. Generally speaking, snap hooks can have small and large gate openings. Regardless, when a snap hook is used, it must be connected to a designated spot, anchorage point, around which gate safety latch can fully closed. The snap hook must be compatible with the device it is connected to. If it's too small or doesn't close, don't use it. In addition to the minimum tensile strength of 5,000 pounds, vertical resistance, the gate itself must be able to withstand a minimum load of at least 3,600 pounds in all directions. Snap hook gates may have a greater load rating as indicated in the manual or on the device. One other thing to note, just because a snap hook or any other component for that matter claims to be for the purpose of fall protection, it does not mean it is approved or even safe for use in the US or Canada. They should be an ANSI and CSA certified. The best way to know whether or not they are in line with the standard is to look for their safety rating markings, as mentioned previously. They should also be marked with the correct ANSI and CSA standard on the device itself. Lanyards. Lanyards are a key part of active fall protection system that can be used to restrain and arrest falls. That does not mean, however, that all lanyards can be used for both applications. In fact, specific lanyards are made for specific purposes. For instance, if you have a non-shock absorbing lanyard, it is to be used for restraint only and never for arresting a fall. Internal lanyards. Internal stretch lanyards, also known as tubular lanyards or particularly oriented yarn, POY lanyards, have a bunched up look to them, making them easy to distinguish from other types. They have a woven or braided yarn layer inside, which stretches when required by a fall, thus slowing the worker to arrest. Pack type lanyards. Pack type lanyards consist of two main types of lanyards, tear tape and rip stitch. These two types of shock absorbing lanyards look almost identical. The pack system at the end of the lanyard contains extra strap, which, in the event of a fall, lets out to slow the worker to a rest. The difference in the two is how they release the additional strap strength. In the rip stitch and the surplus strap is folded over itself and stitched together. When force is applied, the stitch breaks and the lanyard unfolds to limit the fall. The tear tape lanyard works similarly, except inside the pack. There's another strap folding the main strap that tears away and helps to slow the worker's fall. Self-retracting lifeline, SRL. Fall limiting devices, commonly called self-retracting lifelines, SRL, are another highly effective way to limit a fall. SRLs have a snap hook, which connects directly to the rear D-ring. Snap hook, of course, is connected to the lifeline seated or spooled up inside the durable housing component, which then is connected to an anchorage point. Anchorage points. Wearing fall arrest gear and approved lanyard means relatively little if not connected or tied off to an approved load-rated anchorage point, also called anchor point. Just an anchor on a ship prevents a craft from drifting due to wind or current. An anchorage point serves to keep you from similarly falling due to wind or other mishap. It is important to note that an anchorage used to potentially arrest a worker falling 6 feet or less must be capable of supporting at least 5,000 pounds per employee attached or under the supervision of a qualified person. Be designed and installed as part of a complete PFAS with a safety factor of 2. As far as anchorage straps go, as mentioned, there are steel cable slings, and web straps that can be lashed around horizontal steel members or I-beams for quick and effective tie-off. But under no circumstance should you use a lanyard or any other device to choke off unless it has been both designed and approved for this purpose. Inspections. Safety starts with the working knowledge of the equipment you will be using, but continues with an understanding of when and how to inspect it. No matter how familiar you are with the gear you will be using, it must be inspected before using it. It is also wise to inspect it a second time after use before storing it, especially if you have been performing any hot work. If anything appears damaged or worn, remove it from service until it is fixed or replace it immediately. Never use a harness or any other fall protection gear in need of repair. These inspections and required maintenance should also be documented and kept on a file. Too often, inspection logs are found blank or missing. Check for punctures, frayed edges, cuts in the fabric, broken fibers, or signs of excessive wear. Pay attention to and appropriately address any signs of heat or chemical damage. Welding and other hot work, the presence of chemicals, and even friction can all compromise the integrity of your harness. Because of this, you should make sure you re-inspect your harness periodically during work and after as well. While this should go without saying, never tie a knot in the web straps on your lanyard in order to shorten it, bypass a damaged area, or in an effort to reattach two damaged ends. Knots and straps significantly decrease the strength of the strap.
Developmentally thin stories, according to authorities. And this channel 5's Megan McRoberts says the family's attorney is asking questions about a possible safety of failure.
I spoke with the victim's family's attorney earlier today. He tells me he believes something has malfunctioned with the man's safety harness before he fell from this very tall building here behind me. That's still under investigation. OSHA also after beginning its own investigation that great family answers. Construction crews stand by their construction
thought was, this is falling and it's going to hit someone. I didn't see a person falling or anything, but when I got to the studio, I saw, unfortunately, a man laying flat on the ground.
The victim's family showed up to the construction site for answers. How far did he fall? Could it have been prevented? Friends of the victim is from Guatemala and 20s.
And it's unfortunate. I heard to the family and friends.
Katie Bryant shot the scene of another construction accident in the same area less than a year.
I was here for that too, actually. I was in the studio when the funeral hall stopped.
South of a building just across the street from the Alexander about 6 months ago. The building nearby was hit by the debris and 4 people were hurt.
I walk under that building every single day on my work, and I'm scared that something is going to fall now.
We've reached out to different people and companies involved with the construction site, including the construction company, for the developer, and OSHA at the time we were responsive. Reporting in West Palm Beach, I'm Meg Roberts, KTVA News Channel 5.
Make sure there are no missing grommets or any damage to the grommets or their surrounding area. Under no circumstance should you punch holes in the material in an effort to find a better fit. Lastly, make sure that the harness has not been subject to the force of arresting a fall. Be familiar with the type of fall arrest indicators for your harness and know what the various signs of stress means for its use. A harness is required to be removed from surface at any time it prevents or is involved in a fall. Tags and labels. Your inspection should also include required warning labels, informational booklets, and capacity tags. These are required to be present and in legible condition. They should include OSHA/ANSI markings, the date of manufacture, and the date of first use. Be familiar with the load limits for a particular type of harness and its accompanying lanyard, and make sure you have one sufficient for your weight. Remember, brake strength or tensile strength is not the same as capacity. As you know, it is common for material to have a brake strength of 5,000 pounds, but the weight limit allowed may only be 300 pounds. This limit includes clothes, tools, fall rescue gear, etc. So if you are 280 pounds, without any of those things, you will most likely need to choose a harness with a greater capacity. Of course, if any fall indicators have been broken or exposed, it will also need to be removed from service. On shock absorbing lanyards, the fall or arrest indicator is sewn in between the folds. Pull it tight, then with your fingers, try to pull apart the bunched up material to see if doing so exposes the warning. If it does, because the stitching has been compromised, the lanyard will need to be removed from service, even if it is not involved in a fall. Self-retracting lifeline. Similarly, before using a self-retracting lifeline, the individual components need to be inspected. Check the housing for cracks, loose fasteners, distortion, and any malfunctioning parts. All labels should be present in legible condition. To test the lifeline retraction and tension, pull it out and allow it to retract back into the unit. It should do this freely. If it does not retract, discard it. Additionally, check the line for any damage, cuts, burns, corrosion, frays, broken wires, kinking, or excessive wear. If you're using an anchorage strap, make sure it is approved to the tie-off location. Then check the webbing and stitching for cuts, burns, melting, or deterioration. Also check any tags and labels to make sure they are legible. Guardrails. Guardrails need to be inspected before each shift and periodically thereafter. This is especially true for temporary wood rails put in place on roofing projects or to protect workers on unfinished floors of a building. Check for cracks, corrosion, missing or loose bolts or nails, excessive gaps, or or any other signs of weakness or damage. Toe boards. Toe boards and netting, while not necessarily vital to protecting workers at heights from falling, are required on guardrail system and scaffolding as pertaining to protecting workers below from falling tools or objects. Your inspection should ensure they too are in place and equally reliable. Rebar caps. Similar in principle, protruding rebar is not something you normally might associate with fall protection, but as a potentially deadly impalement hazard, it's equally important to do so and inspect it accordingly. In fact, because all protruding steel used for reinforcing must be guarded against impalement, your inspection should note that rebar caps or other protective means are in place. Warning lines. Any warning lines installed on low sloped roofs need to be upright and intact with high visibility flags, spaced no greater than 6 feet apart. If the flags are missing or show significant fading, replace them prior to operations. Check for cuts or other signs of damage. Operations. Know your equipment. Many workers have operated at heights for several years. Experience has made them accomplished and well practiced. This is good because they are efficient, but it can also be bad in that experience at times gives way to bad habits. This means that we do something so often we do not stop to consider whether or not that something is safe, because it's the way we've always done it without accident. If you continue to work unsafely out of habit, though, it is just a matter of time before an accident of some kind will occur. The following slides will touch on principles that are commonly ignored in the name of experience. Operator manuals and labels. You must also read and be familiar with your company's policy and any operator manuals or instructions related to the gear you will be using. These manuals have specific information you need regarding safe operations, maintenance, and pre-shift inspections capacity, and warning labels. Labels too should be legible and referred to often. When tying off to an anchorage point, remember, free fall must be limited to 6 feet. To achieve this when using a 6-foot lanyard, the anchorage point must be level with or above the D-ring on the back of the fall protected body harness. If you're using a lanyard that is shorter than 6 feet, then the anchorage point can be positioned lower than the D-ring as long as the free fall distance doesn't exceed 6 feet. Storage. To keep your equipment protective integrity intact, you must take care of it. The materials can be ruined quickly by UV rays if they are left in the sun. Of course, moisture too can be led to mold or mildew. All materials should be kept in dry areas in orderly fashion. Keep them out of direct sunlight and dry, preferably in a bag or hang up in a storage locker or somewhere similar. Fall clearance distance calculation. Calculating the distance for fall clearance, the distance needed to safely arrest a fall, has everything to do with knowing both your equipment and work site. It is often overlooked or outright ignored. Prior to working at any height, though, a qualified or competent person must account for all facets of the fall protection, including fall clearance distance. It is easy to assume that if you have a 6-foot lanyard, you will only fall 6 feet, or the length of the lanyard. That is not true. If you assume that you will only fall the distance of your connected device length, you may come in contact with the very surface you are trying to avoid. While calculating your total fall clearance, though, you must not forget to take into consideration a few important variables, namely free fall distance, deceleration distance, the D-ring height from the surface, its shift post-fall, and a safety factor, or a buffer. Different companies may refer to these in different ways, but the principles are the same. Each component plays an important role in calculating your true fall distance and the clearance needed. To start with the end in mind, the sum total of these figures will help you determine these distances and then plan accordingly to avoid any lower surfaces in the event of a fall. If the total sum is greater than the distance to the surface below, then you'll need to change your anchorage point, use a shorter lanyard, or find some other approved means by which to get the number equal to or less than the clearance distance. First, your free fall distance is the vertical distance a worker travels from the moment a fall occurs until just before the fall arrest system employs. OSHA limits this distance to 6 feet or less. The free fall distance will vary greatly by worker, lanyard type, lanyard length, and anchor tie-off too. To help though, the free fall distance can be calculated by subtracting the height of the D-ring from the height of the anchorage point. That number is then subtracted from the overall length of the lanyard, giving you the total free fall distance. Take note, a self-retracting lanyard will require a shorter fall clearance than a shock absorbing lanyard, but must use the same maximum deceleration distance when calculating fall clearance, unless the manufacturer suggests otherwise. For example, take a look at these equations. Example 1. With the numbers as they are, your 3-foot free fall is in compliance with the 6-foot limit imposed by the standards. But what if the anchorage was set at 3 feet, as may be the case in something like an aerial lift? The equation, example 2, changes drastically, doesn't it? In fact, an 8-foot free fall is non-compliant. So unless there's a higher approved anchorage, a shorter lanyard must be used. Deceleration distance, on the other hand, is the vertical distance a worker travels between the activation of the fall arrest system and final fall arrest. OSHA limits this distance to a maximum of 3.5 feet, but do not assume that the deceleration distance is always going to be that maximum. Refer to the manufacturer's instructions to determine this number. The deceleration distance that each shock absorbing fall arrest device will permit is typically stated on its product label. The D-ring shift accounts for a maximum 1-foot shift from its original resting place on the worker's back, meaning that when a worker falls, the location of the D-ring fall will shift upwards 1 foot. Always plan for this 1 foot unless otherwise specified by the manufacturer. As for the D-ring height, this is the same as worker's height, as some equations refer to it, because worker height in this instance only refers to the length of the user's body up to the D-ring when the worker is in a resting or working state. Typically, the average 5 feet will be sufficient for this calculation, but in the event that a worker is taller than average, you should take the time to get an actual measurement. The safety factor then is simply an additional clearance allowed from the worker's feet to the surface or obstruction below. This safety factor must be factored into the fall clearance to account for any shifting surfaces or unpredictable arrest forces. Different equations will list this as 1 foot, 1.5 feet, or 2 feet, but conventional wisdom on this buffer says to allow for additional 3 feet. Swing falls. One other related term to be aware of, swing fall, is caused by the pendulum effect. It occurs when a worker falls from a point not directly under the anchor. This event can cause even more damage than the actual fall, as the worker can potentially come in contact with other objects or surfaces. And just like free fall, the act of swinging towards something can just as easily create 5,000 pounds of fall force. In addition of calculating fall clearance, be sure you are taking swing fall into consideration before employees begin working with personal fall protection devices. Aerial lifts, for all intent and purposes, can generally be defined as any piece of equipment that lifts a worker into the air. Under this broad scope, then, you will find boom lifts, scissor lifts, and bucket trucks, even forklifts with work platforms attached, and crane hoisted baskets. Many of these are used interchangeably across construction, maritime, and general industries. Because of this, though, there can be a lot of confusion about what is required and when. A lot of this has to do with misunderstanding of terms. For instance, when people refer to fall protection, they often mean fall arrest gear. And when they refer to aerial lifts, they often include scissor lifts into that category. This is fine according to our general definition, but there are some differences that need to be noted because they will require different applications. For starters, fall protection, meaning the plan of action put in place to protect workers, is required for all types of aerial lifts. Now, the question becomes, is prevention, restraint, or arrest equipment needed? Well, we'll further define and discuss this as it relates to scissor lifts in a moment. But let's start with the easiest to understand, aerial lifts, by which we mean more specifically boom lifts, bucket trucks, vertical lifts, and man baskets, forklift attached, crane suspended. To make it easy, anytime you're in an aerial lift, as just defined, you must have on either fall restraint or fall arrest gear as dictated by the job type being performed and tie off correctly to a designated anchored point. Regarding boom lifts, fall arrest gear will most often be used to accomplish this. Vertical lifts, on the other hand, might simply require the use of fall arrest gear, like an improved body belt.
A 42-year-old man has died in the Goldfields town of Boulder after falling from a cherry picker. The man and a co-worker were riding in the basket of the machine at a cement plant when it tipped over. The 42-year-old fell 20 meters to the ground. The second man was trapped and had to be rescued by emergency crews.
When we attended here, we had one male aloft in the cherry picker, and it was deemed unsafe for any emergency service to approach the cherry picker without making it stable. That's why the cranes were brought in very quickly to secure the top of the basket, which enabled us, a crew to go aloft, rescue the guy from the cherry picker.
The incident is being investigated by WorkSafe, and police will prepare a report for the coroner.
And if you are entering on the bucket of a bucket truck, you must don your gear and tie off to an approved anchorage point on either the bucket or the boom itself. In this case, especially since space is limited, a body belt for restraint purposes may be acceptable.
The second individual was a fatal accident.
One worker killed, another injured. This time, the situation is very real. Our 5 Eyewitness News team has been covering this story all day, finding out how this on-the-job accident happened.
And we have just learned both victims were from out of state. They're among a team of construction workers installing power lines north of New Prague. It is a big project known as CapEx 2020. It began, though, as just another day on the job. The workers dig massive holes 50 feet deep, like the one that you see here. Insert the power pole and then pour the concrete. This is the view now from Chopper 5 this morning as we watch that process come to a sudden and deadly halt. Our Tim Scherner's on the ground near County Road 2. And Tim, you just spoke with a representative from Aldridge Electric. We understand the subcontractor doing the work. What are we learning from them right now?
Well, one of the things that we're learning is a day like today is never routine. We spoke with Jeff Arnold. He's a spokesperson for Aldridge Electric. He talked about this news, what kind of impact it has on him. He actually got emotional when he was speaking about it. It's never easy. A job like this is always dangerous. And if you look behind me, it's almost impossible to believe that somebody fell 50 feet to their death, but they fell into the ground. Well, here's what we know as we show you some pictures from the scene today. The first call came in at about 9 o'clock this morning, and New Prague Fire and the Scott County Sheriff's Office responded to 2 men who fell into a hole, as you said, 40 to 50 feet down. Fire and rescue went in after them. There was a victim at the bottom of that shaft. That was the victim that was pronounced dead when he was brought up out of that shaft. The other victim has been treated and released from a local hospital. Now, OSHA cleared this scene earlier today, but as far as safety is concerned, Jeff Arnold said it's #1 priority on the job. He said the crews are told what to watch out for every day.
It's done on every crew every day, everywhere in the country, and it outlines anything that's going to go on in the operation they're going to perform that day, and associated risk and ways to arrest or prevent that risk, whether it's through, harnesses, lanyards, tiebacks to concrete blocks, exactly what those operations will entail and how we're going to prevent injury.
Well, he hit on a very key point that I want to talk about, which are harnesses being attached to concrete blocks. Now, we do not know at this time whether or not those two men were wearing those safety harnesses and were attached to the block. Information on that has been unclear at this point, and Jeff Arnold said he's been on the ground just not long enough to be able to give us a definitive answer on that. But that is going to be a critical issue in the investigation as it goes forward. OSHA apparently has cleared the scene for them to begin working again if they want to. But we were told earlier today that Aldridge Electric, the contractor that's working on this project, will not work here for another week. Helena, outside of New Prague, Tim Chernow, 5 Eyewitness News.
All right, let's go back now to the project that these men were working on. Their strength.
Seconded.
The anchorage points are load rated. As a result, 2 or more people should only tie off to the same point if it specifies ×2, ×3, etc. Never tie off to a railing if it is not a load rated anchorage point. Lastly, never overload the lift basket itself. Only authorized workers should be in the lift. If the limit is 2 workers, keep it at 2. Additionally, no matter the lift equipment, never tie off to an adjoining unapproved object. Stay inside the platform. Always keep both feet firmly planted on the platform floor and never lean over, sit on, or climb onto the platform railing. Far too often, we see workers climbing or standing on the guardrails or using ladders within a lift to increase their reach or to give them a boost onto another work area. This is dangerous and not approved. Transitions. For the purpose of this training, transitions are when the job type requires workers to go back and forth between roofs or some other height in an aerial lift.
Developing news from KXAN News.
We are continuing to follow that developing news tonight. Emergency crews say 3 workers fell from an Austin construction site in West Campus near the University of Texas. This happened near the corner of West 24th and Oasis this evening. Our Erin Cargile is live at the scene with the latest. Erin?
Good evening, Leslie. Students who live around here tell us that this is going to be a new 6-story college apartment complex, and it's going to be called 2400 New Oasis. Construction here came to a screeching halt this afternoon around 3:30 when 3 workers fell. Officials say each of them were standing at different levels. One fell about 10 feet. The other 2 fell between 15 and 25 feet. Paramedics say 1 person has a head injury. All 3 were rushed to the hospital. It's unclear exactly where each of them were standing and what they were standing on at the time of the accident.
It was a chain of events. We're not sure what started the fall and caused the other 2 to fall. That's still being investigated.
Now, the job site has been shut down. All workers have left. A sign here on the fence says this project is in the hands of Hensel Phelps Construction Company. Online records show OSHA hasn't looked into any other accidents at their sites in Texas in the last 5 years. However, news stories online say a worker died at one of their sites in Maryland in 2010, and another worker died last year of electric shock at a site in California. Also last year, their scaffolding collapsed on more than a dozen cars at a California border crossing. We'll continue to investigate the situation here in Austin. For now, we're live in West Campus. Erin Cargile, KXAN News.
The requirements for fall protection do not go away momentarily. The standards say that a worker may enter or exit an aerial lift at heights above 6 feet, provided that guardrails or a fall arrest system is used while the worker transitions between the 2. A worker may remain tied off to the lift if it is designated to withstand the vertical and lateral load imposed by the employee's movement itself or by arrested fall, or first tie off to an appropriate nearby structure before disconnecting from the lift. However, regarding workers on a roof over or other elevated work surfaces who want to tie off to the lift while working outside of it, most manufacturers of aerial lifts do not recommend it because the force of the fall and any swing fall can easily cause a lift to tip over. Before attempting this, check with the manufacturer of your lift to see if it is doable. If they do not approve it, don't do it. Either way, it is best to take the time to set up an anchorage point or a lifeline on the roof itself, especially if you will be spending a lot of time up there. Roofing. Roofing and other leading edge work is foremost among all of the job types that require forms of fall protection. In a recent study, nearly half of residential construction fatalities were the result of falls, and just over 80% of those involved workers on roofs. And yet, like aerial lifts, it is all too common to see unprotected workers on roofs. This must change. No matter the roof slope, regulations dictated that if you are on a roof, you must be protected by one of the following, if not more: personal fall arrest systems, safety nets, guardrail systems with toe guards on steep slope roofs, or in combination with a warning line system or a safety monitoring system.
You don't get it. That truck's been waking me through everything.
Everything what? 1,000,003 a.m. trips to 7-Eleven?
You have no idea what can happen at 7-Eleven in the middle of the night.
I don't even want to know.
Yeah, that's because after 27, you turn 60.
It's called being an adult, Derek.
Whatever. Thanks for the lift, man. I think my truck's hooped.
About time you replace that thing. It's an embarrassment.
You know it's an embarrassment. That shirt's an embarrassment.
The shirt? The shirt is awesome.
Who told you that? Your mom? No. You know it's not awesome? I left my harness back in my truck.
Want to go back and get it?
No, I'm good. We got to get this done.
You sure?
Yeah, let's get to it. Thanks for the lift, man. I think that truck is hooped.
About time you replace that thing. It's an embarrassment.
No, it's an embarrassment. That shirt's an embarrassment.
This shirt? This shirt is awesome.
You know it's not awesome? I left my harness back in my truck.
Want to go back and get it?
Yeah, I should.
All right. Help me unload first, though.
Eric! You okay? Yeah. Okay, so help.
Lanyards or self-retracting lifelines must limit a worker's free fall to 6 feet or less. Only use one and never connect two or more together in an effort to extend your reach or work area. This is a common sight, but one that defeats the very purpose of arrest gear. Can you see the issue here? The worker has a lanyard connected to a self-retracting lifeline, tangled up in some rope, connected to the horizontal line. If he were to trip and fall, he could go over the edge and hit the ground. Guardrails. Regardless of whether you are working on a roof from a leading edge or on a catwalk above a great height or above industrial machinery, guardrails may be the most common form of fall protection. They are used in almost every industry. Guardrails can be temporary or permanent in nature, but they are almost always considered passive. Never attach a PFAS to a guardrail system unless it has been designed for such a purpose. A qualified person should oversee the installing or building of guardrails. But just so you know, when using guardrails as fall protection, the top of the rail should typically be 42 inches, give or take 3 inches, above the working level. The mid-rail must be at least 21 inches from the working surface, with primary posts spaced no more than 8 feet apart. Materials and equipment must not be stored closer than 6 feet from the edge of the roof unless a guardrail system is in place. The guardrail system is meant to keep workers from nearing any hazard, so it should not be should not, by virtue of its existence, introduce any hazards into the workplace either. Exposed nails, straps, staples, or bolts should be addressed so as not to potentially snag, puncture, or cut workers on their clothing.
A freak accident at a construction site today involved a very common construction tool, something you probably have in your own kitchen. CBS 2's Steve Langford reports on a simple delivery that turned tragic.
The truck carrying a load of sheetrock still at the construction site in Jersey City, hours after the truck's operator died right beside his rig, listed as belonging to Living Right Trucking, Inc. The words "owned by God" added to the side of the truck. 58-year-old Gary Anderson of Somerdale, New Jersey, killed as he was delivering the sheetrock when a tape measure fell off a construction worker's belt 50 stories above, bounced off a piece of equipment near the ground, then struck the truck driver in the head. Police say Anderson was not wearing a safety helmet.
Yeah, it's a little crazy. You don't know what's going to happen ever. Just come in one day and it could be your last.
Juan Bonilla works construction at a site nearby and says a safety helmet would have made all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he would have been hurt maybe in the hospital, but it would have probably saved a life.
One worker here who didn't want to go on camera told me the victim, apparently a very religious man, was in the middle of telling a story and uttered the words, "God is good," the moment right before he was hit and killed. OSHA is investigating the accident, which happened just a few feet from the entrance to a PATH station.
It's very scary. I had no idea that something so small could do so much damage.
Neither the trucking firm nor the construction company would comment on the bizarre tragedy. In Jersey City, Steve Langford, CBS 2 News.
The victim, Gary Anderson, was rushed to Jersey City Medical Center, but died an hour later.
Holes and openings. If there are holes, openings, windows, or stairwells that workers could fall through, proper protective measurement needs to be taken. Anytime an employee is working around a hole or opening with a 6-foot or greater fall hazard, they must be protected by floor, wall, covers, or guardrail system. They also need to be protected from tripping hazards. Floor covers should be made of solid piece of material that is capable of holding at least twice the weight of any employees, equipment, and/or materials that travel over it or come to rest on it. They must cover the entirety of the hole or opening without gaps and be secure enough as to avoid disruption by wind and people or the like. Also, the cover should not create additional tripping hazards.
Construction workers facing potentially life-threatening injuries this evening after falling 4 stories from a hotel in West Austin. He was working on the new Marriott Hotel on Ranch Road 2222 just east of FM 620. KXA's Lauren Kravitz live at the scene with more on a surge in recent construction accidents in the Austin area. Lauren?
Yeah, we are at the Residence Inn tonight, and caution tape is still up here at the scene behind me where this fall appears to have happened. Crews just put up some plastic tape over this window. I want to give you a look here. These 3 windows in the center were completely exposed. They are now covered up. Representatives with OSHA are still on scene. They were talking with construction workers about how this man fell, and it's just one of 3 accidents that have happened at construction sites alone this month. This accident that happened today, police say that a man was working on the new hotel. He fell 30 to 40 feet this afternoon. OSHA sent investigators to the site to determine what happened, but so far have yet to release any details. Now, just last week, another construction worker fell at the site of the new Pflugerville High School. EMS says he fell about 12 feet. Crews at the scene say he worked for Empire Steel, a subcontractor helping with the high school. And at the beginning of this month, the man was found dead at a construction site on San Antonio Street in downtown Austin. A construction worker in his 20s was found in one of the bathrooms of the high-rise. Cause of that death is still under investigation. Now, we are also waiting to learn more about how the worker was hurt Of course, at this site, Austin police say that information has to come from OSHA. Again, OSHA isn't releasing any detail at this time. I did try to speak with some managers here on site with the construction crews. They declined to comment today. So we'll keep you posted as soon as we learn any more information. We're live in West Austin tonight. Lauren Kravitz, KXAN News.
Construction work.
Warning lines. OSHA allows use of a warning line system, also called a flag system, as a means of fall protection in certain situations. Note, warning lines alone are not sufficient. More specifically, for employees engaged in roofing activities on low-slope roofs with unprotected sides and edges 6 feet or more above lower levels. The following methods of fall protection are acceptable: a warning line system and a guardrail system, a warning line system and safety net system, a warning line system and personal fall arrest system, or a warning line system with safety monitoring system. Safety monitoring system. In certain situations, when conventional fall protection systems are infeasible on low slope roofs, safety monitoring systems can be implemented. The key word here, though, is infeasible, not inconvenient. If a qualified person determines that the use of fall arrest system, guardrails, and warning lines are not doable, or that they may cause a greater hazard, tripping hazard due to cross lines, then the standard allow for such a system. It sounds easy enough, but the standards for safety monitors are in fact quite strict. For example, safety monitors must be in the same working surface as employees they are watching. They must be within visual contact with employees and be close enough to orally communicate with them and hear communication from them. Additionally, their only job is to monitor, warn, and correct. They must not work alongside their crew, nor have any other responsibilities that could take their focus away from the employees they are watching. Emergency response. Even when you're doing everything right, accidents can happen, and because of the never-ending potential for accidents, employers are required to provide means by which employees can be promptly rescued and appropriately treated in the event of a fall. As part of this responsibility, every company should have a written rescue plan. All workers should be familiar with this plan and know the roles. This plan will differ from company to company and maybe even from job type to job type. There are so many other things and situations that can cause injury or even death on the job. While we cannot go over them all here, it is important to take the time to analyze the potential hazards each job site presents. One thing for sure, by following proper fall protection procedures, they can be prevented. Safety is a responsibility of everyone involved in fall protection procedures. You can help ensure safe operations by knowing and following all safe work practices and safety regulations that are applicable to your workplace. When in doubt during any phase of an operation, take the time to stop and consult your manufacturer's manual, company rules, co-workers, or safety supervisors. Time is money, true, but a mistake made to save time can cost money and lives. Good luck and stay safe.